HBO's The Last of Us has set a new bar for game adaptations. But will Season 2 level up and dodge the pitfalls of The Last of Us Part 2? What'll it look like, and will they change Joel's fate? It's time to speculate. Oh, and by the way, I'm gonna assume that you've already played both games, or that you know exactly why Part 2 divided the fandom. But if you're just following the show and don't want to know the full story of the games yet, fair warning. I'm gonna get into some spoiler talk later on, and you're gonna want to cover your ears for that. But don't worry, I'll give you a spoiler alert before diving into the specifics. So with that out of the way, let's dive into what we officially know about Season 2. There are major differences between the two Last of Us games, both in terms of atmosphere and tone and narrative. But the main thing is that Part 2 is much longer than the first. The story's incredibly dense, and you can't pull that off in a single season. Now, Part 1 was relatively simple. Joel meets Ellie, who's immune to the cordyceps infection, and he needs to take her to the Fireflies in Salt Lake City. Even though the game's version of the events is far longer, you can easily compress that into a 9-episode season without losing the magic of the original, or diverging from the source material. The thing about Part 2 is that it features two different perspectives of two highly complex characters. It's about 10 hours longer than Part 1, depending on your playstyle and if you stop and look around the environments and gather collectibles.
What happened? My best friend was there. And she got bit too. Swear to me that everything that you said about the Fireflies is true.
It took me nearly 2 days to beat the game, but the first one just took me a day and a couple of Red Bulls. So yeah, if I had to venture a guess, it'd take about 14 to 16 well-written episodes to tell Part 2's story, and co-creator Craig Mazin thinks the same. In fact, he was thinking about the second season before the first one even hit HBO, and he and Neil Druckmann are already discussing how they can tell Part 2's story, and how they can add, subtract, and expand on a story that's already been told to the gaming community. It's really exciting stuff, and I'm gonna dive into that in a bit. But I need to make one thing clear before moving on.
What we do matters.
Well, then why aren't you at the lookout?
Because Tommy and Joel didn't show up.
What do you mean?
We waited for them for an hour. I was looking for their horses when I saw lights.
Don't expect the TV series to go on forever, because it won't. Mazin spoke with Collider recently, and what he said really resonated with me. He explained that he doesn't want The Last of Us to be a show that goes on and on just because a network is getting millions of views per episode. The ratings don't matter to him. Besides, he also said that if a network keeps renewing a TV show, it kind of reduces the stakes of the characters. The story keeps going, keeps stretching, and keeps creating ridiculous plot conveniences to keep the characters alive. And a series like The Last of Us doesn't deserve that. So, if Part 2 can be told in one season, then the series ends after Season 2. And if it needs 2 more seasons, then they'll do a third. But not more than that. Ellie's story will end the way the game intended. And I totally agree with that. Why stretch it out the way 13 Reasons Why and Supernatural when you can end it like 6 Feet Under or Jane the Virgin? Anyway, the bottom line is, the TV series won't stay past its welcome.
So... You want to keep exploring? Hell yeah.
Mazin and Druckmann won't create storylines that aren't in the game or the comic book. It'll stay true to the source material and expand on what's already there. For example, the first 2 episodes explored the origins of the cordyceps infection, which wasn't included in the game, but it fleshes out the post-apocalyptic world and is really fitting for the story. And that's how Season 2's gonna be as well. But now, into the good stuff. So, as of right now, neither Pedro Pascal nor Bella Ramsey have confirmed if they're returning for Season 2. But we can obviously assume they're coming back, since Part 2 relies heavily on Joel and Ellie's relationship to tell the story. For those of you who haven't played Part 2, I'll just give you a spoiler-free run-through of what to expect in Season 2. The game takes place about 5 years after the first, and shifts the focus on Ellie and her relationships with a bunch of interesting characters. And it has a really shocking twist that I'll get into later, with a spoiler warning of course. Now, the time jump isn't huge, but it's still a time jump. Some shows recast their characters in order to accommodate the age difference, but not The Last of Us. Mazin ruled out recasts because, in his words, as long as people are absorbed in the story, it doesn't matter if the actors have an age difference from their game counterparts. Story is everything, period. The show's already taken a few liberties with how it tells Joel and Ellie's story, so I'm sure they're gonna take the same creative license with Season 2. And as far as LGBTQIA representation goes, Bella Ramsey has a message for those that review-bombed Episode 3. Get used to it. Episode 3, or the Bill and Frank episode, was by far the biggest change between the series and the game. It's one of those changes that put the show in a league of its own. Not only did it expand on Bill and Frank's story from the game, where everyone kinda knew they were lovers, it gave two gay men a beautiful life and a happy ending. Or rather, as happy an ending as there can be in a post-apocalyptic world. It got review-bombed by people who spewed toxic and homophobic comics in their reviews.
Attention. Harboring or aiding wanted criminals is punishable by death.
Down here.
So, if they're hoping that Mason and Druckmann are gonna slow down and not include gay stories in Season 2, well, they won't, so tough luck. In an interview with GQ UK, Ramsey revealed that when she was in the Season 2 writer's room, she was told that the series will follow Part 2 storyline very closely. And if that's the case, then it'll only keep expanding on LGBTQIA stories.
Hey!
I told you a real fucking story.
I did tell you a real fucking story.
Oh, you want a bite, Mark? Do you hear that? Jesse?
And honestly, if people want to miss out on the series because it has gay and trans characters, then that's on them. Ramsey is just excited to get started on Ellie's story from Part 2. But now, spoiler alert for those of you who haven't played Part 2, because this is a big one. Cover your ears. Now, Ramsey revealed something really interesting about Season 2, and we need to talk about it. A large chunk of the next season will separate Ellie from Joel.
Yeah, and it became very, very clear very quickly how much people loved it, the game, and the experience of playing the game.
And we know why. But whatever happens, Season 2 needs to avoid a critical mistake from the game. Abby's brutal murder of Joel divided the fans into two groups. One that loved the game for its bold choices, and one that completely hated it. And that is one of the biggest pitfalls the series will need to avoid.
Get this over with.
Tourniquet his leg. Do it.
It's not because Joel can't die and needs to live forever. It's because if you're gonna brutally kill off one of the most beloved characters in recent video games, then you gotta do it right. Think of Brock from God of War Ragnarok, and you'll know what I mean. You have to do it in a way that feels earned.
Hey! I'm talking to you! You never shut up! Run! For the face,
Let go of the boy and face me.
And not just shock value. If Mason and Druckmann intend to follow Part 2 storyline closely, then at least put Joel's death much later in Season 2, maybe even in the finale. And then Season 3 could pick up a while after his death, with Ellie on a revenge mission against Abby. That's how I think it should go, but I want to know your thoughts. How should Season 2 do justice to Joel's character? And that's all for this one. I'll see you in the next video.